solutions-led storytelling is. So it's a tale as old as time. It's just what I call it, really say that, tourism could do a much better job of highlighting how tourism is actively presenting solutions to local and global problems through our industry. AI can't churn out an article genuinely by an authority on boutique eco hotels such as me. Don't make me say my name in the third person, I hate that. So that's where we'll have an edge, I hope. First person stories. So I just wrote an article about what it's like to have an accident abroad from a practical point of view, and what it's like to experience temporary disability suddenly, and what you need to look for in a hotel, and navigating insurance and all of that. So those first person articles are really crucial.
Hello and welcome to the Travel Growth Podcast. I'm Tom McLaughlin, the founder of North 9, and this is where I speak to successful travel business leaders and dig into the successes, challenges and learnings from their experiences over the years. So you, the listener, can take away actionable advice and improve your own businesses and maybe even lives too. My guest today is Juliet Kinsman. She's a renowned communications expert in luxury travel. She was the first ever sustainability editor for Condé Nast Traveller, and she's the force behind Boutico, where she has redefined what it means to travel with a conscience. She's also the host of Funny Old World, a podcast for the eco-curious. Juliette doesn't critique thread counts, she audits impact. From her early days shaping the voice of Mr. and Mrs. Smith to her current role as a globally recognised solutions-led storyteller, she's here to help us move past the buzzwords and talk about how travel can actually be a force for good. We cover a lot in this conversation, from embracing discomfort and Juliet's personal journey to the future of journalism, data and storytelling, and how luxury travel brands can make a positive impact on the world. So without further ado, please welcome the incomparable Juliet Kinsman. Juliet, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Very welcome. I'm very excited to talk to you. We've got to know each other a bit better over the last year or two, and always have very interesting conversations and go off on lots of good tangents and topics. So it's nice to sit and record one and share some of the learnings and experience that you've had from over the year. So appreciate you taking the time.
Good. Well, the best conversations, I say, they're like conversational jazz. You don't know what direction it's going to go in and come back.
Hey, I'm all for a bit of jazz. Hopefully we can come out with that today. Generally I start these things by letting people give a bit of background about their journey, like how they've got to where they are today. Obviously you've set up Boutico, you do lots of different things. There's lots of strings to your bow. So I don't know, maybe you could give us that quick history of education back to then and kind of what's happened along the way to bring you to now.
Thank you. Well, no matter what I've done in my 30 plus year career, as LinkedIn tells me, haunts me with my actual timeline. It's always, the one thread that's run through all of it is, I guess, a passion for editorial. So journalism, and whether that's working as a purist, a journalist and editor in consumer magazines or publications, or whether that's what I call a brand journalist. So creating communications for a brand that still upholds that same integrity as you would a journalist. So I've done lots. The first part of my career was actually as a music journalist. So, and now here I am. I have a slogan, actually. Hark at her with a slogan. I have a slogan: sharing stories to inspire impact. And I developed that a couple of years ago because it really helped me filter my work. It helped me when work comes to me. Is it sharing stories to inspire impact? Yes. Great. That's what I want to do. And I found that really helpful. So thank you for having me.
So you started doing music journalism. Tell us a bit more about that. What were you doing? Where were you doing it? How did that segue into travel and doing that stuff?
It did segue, actually. And when I think about it, we have chapters in our careers. So the first few years back in the 90s was when dance music was really hitting the mainstream. It was a lot of subcultures. And I edited guidebooks around nightclubs. So I got to know the geography of this country very well. I drove around. You can still test me on who played what where. And it was a great education. Honestly, I don't think many people who live here really have traveled around the UK as much as we could or should. So I have a good understanding of the UK. I loved that. And then, so writing about dance music, then I became a generalist in women's magazines, very much at the height of celebrity magazine culture. And I was on holiday with a friend of mine who is, well, who was a club promoter. We were in a bar in Ibiza, and a woman walked in. They started, chatting. Very smart person, wonderful person. And that was James and Tamara, my friends, who went on to come up with the idea of a hotel guidebook. So they said, "Can you write it? Can you help us do that?" I've been writing and editing for years. And it went on to become Mr. and Mrs. Smith as a guidebook. That idea was back in 2002, hit bookshelves 2003. And I very much loved creating the brand voice for that. That was different to anything else. So that's always where my passion has been. So if you look at when I wrote for Time Out or music magazines, and you're delivering information in a way that you want to be entertaining,
Mm.
we took it to the next level. And it was a segue, because you'll find a lot of people who'd been spending their time, at the edge of dance floors and VIP rooms, went on to want to spend their time in beautiful boutique hotels. So there was that natural sort of progression, as we always said, from dance floors to do not disturb signs.
Yes,
And
nice.
yeah, and I feel incredibly lucky to have seen so many special places, but more than anything else, the same as working in nightclubs actually, is meeting so many interesting creative people.
Mm. That book outsold Harry Potter in Waterstones, I saw somewhere along with
Yes,
my research.
it did
So it
in
was clear.
2008.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing. So so were you there working with Mr. and Mrs. Smith for a while, and that kind of led you down the travel journalism route? Like how did things evolve from there?
Yeah, so obviously then I reviewed hotels for lots of all sorts of publications, contributed, commented around that, whether it's for the New York Times or for the is it what's the, oh gosh, now I'm going to forget the name of the Australian titles, Sydney Morning Herald. It was really, really an honor to be celebrating these great places. But what it really taught me was, the value of recommendation. And we took it very seriously. And that curation of Mr. and Mrs. Smith's hotel collection, I always thought, if I'm going to say something nice about a hotel and people are going to end up staying there and spending their hard-earned money and precious time off, it better be a trustworthy recommendation. And I think that's what carries you through as a journalist, if you want to have integrity, whatever it
Mm.
is you're recommending or talking about. And I think it's become a bit blurred. Then, as we know, the whole digital and content landscape changed. And first of all, we had bloggers come in who actually performed a bit of a public service. They were disruptive because you started to have a lot of journalists going on nice red carpeted press trips where they got treated like royalty, and perhaps that skewed how they represented their stay. Bloggers were the voice of truth. They were typically anonymous. They'd have these long word-based blogs, and they would cut through that. And then that transitioned into influencers. So I think it's all become a bit muddied, but what we all need and want are those trusted voices and experts. And that's where I think, in a time of AI, trusted human experts will really have their time again. We are, of course, threatened by AI
Mhm.
generating content, but I do think that the power of trusted humans is still valuable.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm gonna come back round to the AI topic for us to delve a little bit deeper and get your thoughts on that. What so obviously, like you say, you were broadening into different publications and things at that point. I think was it 2020 when you became the first ever sustainability editor for Condé Nast? Was it then? Was that alongside Boutico, or did Boutico kind of come after that?
Yeah. So what happened? So if I rewind a little bit back to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith transitioned into an OTA. So it became an online travel agency, typically, where there was the business model was such that bookings became a big part of the revenue. And so it changed, and the content that we were writing and the editorial that we were writing was really predominantly to promote and sell those hotel rooms. I mean, it still is beautiful quality, but what really excited me was I started to notice a new genre of hotel, a new breed of hotel, which was not just design-led hotels, but design-led hotels that were doing good, particularly Fogo Island Inn in Canada. And I went there for my honeymoon actually in 2015. And it was then that I really realized that was my passion, was to work with these kind of hotels. So I came back, and that's when I specialized in sustainable luxury hotels. And Boutico was officially born in 2016. So I've been doing it quite a while.
Okay.
And that was, yeah, that was navigating consumers to these hotels, but also working with the hotels to articulate why they were special and deserved people to stay more than your regular boutique hotel. So Boutique Eco, beautiful portmanteau.
Yeah, love it. Tell us a bit. Yeah, tell us a bit more about Boutico then. So that's been running alongside, I guess,
Yeah.
acting as a journalist in a more traditional sense at the same time. So what are you doing in the Boutico guise?
I loved, so when Boutico started, it was quite hard to distinguish these hotels back then. And back then, I mean, you'll know about the value and how I really let opportunities slip through my fingers. Anything you put into Google around sustainable luxury travel or sustainable luxury hotels, all roads led to me and Boutico, because I was really the only one talking loudly about it. And I probably didn't monetize on that how I should have. But I was working with hotels in different ways. So we made beautiful films. I worked with a filmmaker, Kuba Novak, to create stories that really captured the spirit of what that hotel did. And it wasn't necessarily, back then everyone just thought sustainability meant solar panels, low carbon, and that wasn't sexy. It wasn't a reason for someone to go and stay there particularly. But we were working with hotels to communicate their company culture, and we talked about B Corp before everyone understood what that meant and the significance of it. And so I helped create a brand in Mauritius called Salt, and we base that really around its spirit of local, as a sort of antidote to the typical Mauritian resort hotel. It was much more independent. It was about getting out into the community. So it was really celebrating all different ways that a hotel could be sustainable. I absolutely loved it, and I'm thrilled that there are so many types of these hotels now. And yeah, it was such a great time.
What was there something that happened that drew you into you said like hotels, companies that were doing good? Like where was there a moment of just like, oh, that's the
Yes,
thing that I want, or I want to go into, or I want to support, or whatever it might
absolutely.
be?
Absolutely. And I very much sort of have codified that now. And my framework, which I talk about a lot, we launched a campaign with the Datai Langkawi in Malaysia last year, my solutions-led storytelling, sort of, let's call it methodology or framework or philosophy. And that is what I was doing. I just didn't call it that. So if you take Salt in Mauritius back then, when I was out there working with them, it was from the Lux resorts. And I was chatting to locals, and that's the key thing, about what were the concerns for them locally. And a newspaper report had come out that they had the highest levels of cancer in Africa. And I dug a bit deeper, and it told me that, particularly around agriculture, you could pick up a lettuce leaf and it would have traces of 10 potentially carcinogenic chemicals on it. So, wow, we thought, how can this hotel be modeling practices that are not only better than that, but are an antidote to that? So, the hotel partnered with this really great social enterprise and local initiative where it was permaculture and organic farming. So you didn't have the chemicals. So it was a solution to that problem, local and, and in context. But also the people working in those farms were people who'd experienced long-term unemployment due to drug dependency. So it was giving opportunity in a society actually that can be a little bit challenging around that. And that's what we wanted to do, is showcase. I'm not sure how active all of that is now, so I
Mm.
wouldn't want to speak to it. But often these idealistic goals, they can be very hard to implement at scale.
Yeah.
But it's really important hotels try something different and don't just sleepwalk through procurement and follow their own, the SOPs like they always have and try something new.
Yeah, you need to, yeah, it's pushing uphill for a long time, isn't it, before the momentum comes? And I think it often takes kind of prodding various different areas to find out where the thing is that it's a bit of a Jenga kind of, which one's going to move in the way that we want it to move. And then when it does, let's put the effort behind it and go for that. They can't all work.
Definitely, it is Jenga. But I'll tell you what, I think why that example is important for us to talk about when we're talking about travel growth and travel industry is people are risk averse. And my observation in our world is people are becoming more and more risk averse. And really, as we know, taking risks is needed for innovation. I have a whole hypothesis behind this, actually, which links to your digital world, which is really that so many company agendas are set by the MO of Silicon Valley and typically tech people. And I'm sorry if I'm generalizing, and I probably should do some research before I wax lyrical on this completely out of the.
That's what we're here for, Juliet. Yeah, no, let's go for it. Let's poke the nest.
Let's see some conspiracy theories. But I just think I do have friends who've worked for LinkedIn, and from what I've heard anecdotally, typically owned by Microsoft, typically of that species of corporate employee manager, is they're risk averse. That's why I think this corporate culture of being risk averse and measuring everything in guaranteed quantified metrics, is killing a lot of human based opportunities and solutions, such as the one I just mentioned. People don't want it. So I think it's really important to think about that digital landscape and how the tech, we can all demonize the tech bros, but I do think it's important to look at how tech has changed how we measure success.
I guess it's risk averse and also just like shareholder value driven, the way things are talked about. So it's
profit at all costs.
Yeah,
profit, yeah.
It's not necessarily taking into account, if you're going to shave a bit of margin off to have a positive impact somewhere, are they going to make that choice? Yeah, a lot of the time, probably not. So yeah, it's difficult.
And as we know, publicly listed, companies, they are mandated to work on behalf of maximizing profits for the shareholder. They have to do that. And I think people sometimes forget that. But I do think privately owned companies can, so if there's privately owned companies listening, you're the ones who can innovate. You can get the halo for it. You can share those stories and you will take the more, the deeper thinking customers and sustainability minded customers, you will win them.
Yeah, and it's I guess again it's the opportunity, because that's the gap that those big companies won't go after. So you by being different, you create a space that you can leapfrog and explore an area that they otherwise wouldn't make the most of. So there's a lot of value in that. What you mentioned, solutions led storytelling there. Tell us a little bit more about that. What does that mean? How should someone who's listening, a company that's listening, think about solutions-led storytelling? How can they get into it? What's the value of it as well? Like because we're talking about commercial value. This, if a shareholder's going to look at this and say, "Oh, why would I do this thing? It's not going to benefit me." Privately owned companies also are going to be thinking in that way a lot of the time. So yeah, tell us a bit more about it.
It's hard to quantify the value of a great story in your marketing converting into business because it's reputational economics, right? But we know that every purchasing decision is an emotional decision. And some neuroscientists will say that, I don't know how they create these numbers, but they'll say, it's 80% an emotional decision. It's your amygdala where actually the emotions engage that help you choose something. And stories activate the amygdala. They, stories are what they say, that you're 22 times more likely to remember a story than just straight data or facts. Again, I don't know how they measure that. I need to do a neuroscience course before I keep quoting all of these things so I can actually qualify these things. But it's really interesting. So for me, a story is whenever I've been an editor, whether it's nightclub guides back in the 90s or whether it was hotel guides and luxury guides in, the noughties. Um, you I always believe you want to tell, not sell. So that's the difference between a brochure. So you want to pull people in to your story, and you want them invested in listening rather than pushing out marketing messages. And so that's what I think stories do. But even better, if you can actually frame it, it's called the BAB theory, the BAB theory. I'm sure people have heard of that in marketing. So you the B stands for before. So you represent how a landscape looks in terms of the problem or challenge. Then you represent A, after, how it looks, this great vision for what could be if you implement this solution. And then you've got the B again, the bridge, which is the sort of the mechanism to get from before to after. That's what solutions-led storytelling is. So it's a tale as old as time. It's just what I call it, really, really say that, tourism could do a much better job of highlighting how tourism is actively presenting solutions to local and global problems through our industry.
Maybe you could bring it to life with some examples then. So some things that you've done with people where that approach is helping to shine a light on the brand and get traction for the brand. And because I agree, like you say, it's very hard to sort of take data and say, oh, because we did this, it led to X amount of outcome, because so much is happening in the muddy middle, I think. And you can't see the exact impact. And we can come on to that science and storytelling piece in a minute as well. But yeah, I guess maybe you could talk a little bit about some stuff that you've done with people, so that is that storytelling piece that is based on impact, doing good, bringing things to life.
Definitely. I mean, I've got lots of macro and micro examples. Let's pretend that you've booked into a fortune teller, Tom, and I'm laying out in front of you some cards. Pick a card. Would you like a community card example, or would you like a nature example?
Oh,
Where would you like it in the world? Pick your continent. I'm low on Antarctica and Arctic.
Okay, let's go community and Asia.
Okay, perfect. Oh, spilling with them. So many examples of it. So first of all, look at a challenge. You can always look at a challenge. Lots of parts of Asia where you're going to have, for me, one that chimes with me is gender inequality, particularly in terms of employment. So if you look at the Maldives, only 4% of their workforce is female, right? So that's a massive red flag for me in terms of recommending a destination. Not that we should call them destinations, because they're destinations for us, but homes for the people who live there. Okay, and I'm going to say community impact in Asia. I'm choosing the Maldives. I'm choosing gender equality. I really loved what Soneva did in terms of, they talked a lot about giving more women opportunities in hospitality and training those women, because it's complicated culturally for them, because families are reluctant to let their young single women go and live on a remote resort island. Muslim culture, and it didn't sit well with them. So they created a safe, respectful environment to make that possible. So there's one example. And I can think of another one. Oh, a great one, which I always love, and I've seen it firsthand, which is always the kicker, isn't it? So the Dato Langkawi in Malaysia, they work with Green Growth Foundation, which is an organization across Malaysia where they have eco school initiatives. So a typical, state government-run school would have little eco clubs, let's call them, and it's imparting lots of different aspects of why we need to look after nature, and budding environmentalists are cultivated. And I think because they've been doing it over the years, some of those students have gone on to work at the Datai, and the Datai Sustainability Initiative is, of course, called the Datai Pledge. So, it's not just altruistic kindness for the community, you're cultivating talent as well, potentially.
And I guess from a marketing perspective, you are, you specifically, and the hotel or the company or whoever it is that is doing it, is creating content and stories around what they're doing, those solutions that they're creating, so that when potential customers find them they're more likely to book something because they're engaged and aligned with the positive impact that company is trying to have, right? That's the thinking behind it.
That is, I mean, the thinking with solutions-led storytelling, stealth, meritocratic marketing, let's call it. The thinking for me, well, it's actually not so much because I'm not so much. I come from a journalistic point of view, as I say, which is I always think of the audience first, so what benefits them. I just think that a lot of hotels aren't telling these stories as well as they could. And if you go back to my slogan of sharing stories to inspire impact, I think it's a really powerful way to help exponentiate an understanding of why society could do better to
Yeah.
look after nature or people. So there's that. But yes, in terms of facilitating stronger stories that they can use as their currency through their social media, or even on property, in terms of team
Mm.
sharing these stories with guests. Yes, it's really, really powerful, and it makes them appreciate that hotel.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about, again, from some of the stuff that we do ourselves at North Nine, and then like other companies that we work with, and trying to think about it in that sense of the full circle. So it's like, yeah, what are the benefits here? The benefits are like just doing good and having a positive impact is something you would hope lots of people want to do and are motivated by. But like you say, cultivating a good, strong team and culture is another really important part of this. And you're right, it becomes much easier to do that if you are all aligned with the same message and approach. And yeah, you're more likely to get good, engaged people do it and working hard in your teams by doing that. And then, yeah, I think I'm thinking of if there's a hotel or a tour operator or someone listening and they're thinking, oh, should I do this thing? What's the benefit? My margin's a bit down on last year and I've got to think about where the money's coming from. Like, why would I do this thing? I think it's that idea that you are creating something to talk about that people will naturally want to share because it's good, positive, like information, and it's different from the norm, and that's where the commercial benefit comes from, because you're, rather than saying, hey, come and book our trip or book a room in our hotel, like we've got 3 shower cubicles, it's like, oh no, like look at this thing and this story that we're doing. And back to how you started it off, stories are way more engaging to people, and they're
Yeah.
more likely to share them on social. They're more likely to people are more likely to write about them in publications and so on. So I do think there's a lot of scope and potential for people if they step back and think about things in this way, that create commercial avenues and opportunities from a marketing perspective.
Well, and Tom, I mean, what is the very best form of marketing still? Always has been and probably always will be. What is the very best form of marketing?
Well, I mean, word of mouth is
Right,
what you're going to say,
right,
I think. Yeah.
right. Word of mouth. And so the kind of targeted campaigns that you do, I imagine, we're certainly, is essentially a version of word of mouth. If you are using these genuine, authentic stories and they feel like they're passing these on, that is the ultimate. You're facilitating word of mouth through social media. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we touched on that science and storytelling side of things there. So how do you see the relationship between those two things? So yeah, storytelling and data and all those kind of things sometimes maybe get lumped into 2 completely different categories. So how do you think they connect?
Yes, data. Data. I love data, and I've always been a bit of a geek when it comes to tech. And obviously I was part of a group that created what was called Weaver. It was a sustainability management system, which has now been acquired by Travelers. So I still, I love tech. That's all. I love data. And it's really important that we look at the data as well. And I love Brené Brown, who of course is such a successful successful TED Talk. She always talks about what are stories but data with soul. So I love the idea. I don't know if you know Solitaire Townsend. She says, I think she calls it where logic meets magic. But in terms of data and being strategic, I always say to people, if you're deciding a digital marketing campaign, what's key is always imagine yourself on the receiving end of what you're sharing. And that, I think people forget to do that. And I think we live in a world where most people make decisions based on what they think they should do for their job, what suits the corporate agenda, what suits their company, and they forget to be human beings. So we can get all the data. We need the data on, every aspect of, who your dream customer is, making sure that your information and your content aligns with what they're looking for in terms of price, but all of those things. We need the data, the science. But then just stop and just be a human being and think of your feed. If you're looking at Instagram or think of a website, look it through the eyes of someone who's come to that to book a holiday, and what their feeling might be, what inspires them, the magic. And it's not always the hard sell, and it's like the data should be invisible to them. They shouldn't feel like that is all, everything's so targeted at specific customers these days. I think it still needs to feel a little bit magical and human and surprising.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Ask me more specific data questions. I feel like
I guess it can be misleading, can't it? So I think it's that, like you said there, it's the balance of the two. So people can get too obsessed with the data side, and they can be looking at analytics and saying, "Oh, our traffic's gone up by 25%," and but exactly as you said there, they're not then moving away and just opening their eyes and seeing what someone else sees, or asking other people who are less maybe intimately involved with their website or something to kind of go and just get some general feeling for how people interact on that, or how people interact with a story. So I think, that kind of each of those sides, I think is interesting.
We can optimize everything, but it's like, imagine a person who goes and sees a dating coach just to make them great on that date. That's good. That will help them to a point. Ultimately, how they are as a human being and their authentic personality is what's going to, come through. And I think that's what we have to remember. And I think when I work with a lot of marketing departments, and the ones, again, it speaks to that risk. And I've worked with some of the very best luxury hotel groups in the world who have the highest quality, highest calibered reputations. And in the past, when we weren't so programmed to follow optimization and metrics, we could have some more fun. I remember I used to just lie on my sofa for, it could be like a whole hour, just imagining a subject header that was a bit spiritual, esoteric. And I pictured it sort of literally landing on someone's phone. And that person, typically a woman who is booking hotels either she may be the matriarch, she may be, for her partner, maybe her boss, to sound like, from the 60s. But so picturing that person, that human, what it would feel. And now I see a lot of brands, and I'll tell you what, Tom, on a number of occasions, I've had 2 newsletters drop in my inbox with the exact same subject header and the exact same emojis within an hour of each other, because everyone's just optimizing it and using AI, and they've forgotten how to speak from their heart. So, we can have all the data that tells us to do this, people open up at this time, but sometimes just don't play by the rules, conversational jazz.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because, like you say, as AI becomes more prominent and more people start to use it, I think writing is one of the activities that people have maybe associated with it sort of out of the box. It's not necessarily the thing I think it's best for as a tool. But yeah, I think that's when it came out, everyone's suddenly like, oh, hey, I can write 100 blog posts in 5 minutes and away we go. But I think you're right. Like it's sort of depending on how good and how well people train the model, it's just sort of, it can be a real funnel just into sameness, and so on the one hand that's bad because you just end up saying the same thing as everyone else and no one's interested, but on the other side it's actually an amazing opportunity to stand out and be different. And I think like you're saying, lying on the sofa and just dreaming up of something different and sounding human is the way that you can stand out now. It's almost like you want mistakes in
Yes,
your LinkedIn posts or in your blog posts, like, because they
I
are
do.
the things that sound real. And I think we're certainly going to go through a period where, that only increases kind of the type of thing that people want, before, yeah, I don't know, the AI
And
gets
al-
better at that thing.
and also, can I just remind everyone, or just encourage everyone, actually sit down, just scrawl ideas down, pen on paper, just let it flow, find your own voice. Because I wrote a whole article the other day, pen on paper, and people, they will notice.
Mm.
And if people want to hack, and actually, if we, I'll explain a bit what I love doing as a consultant. Um, but I often write articles either when I don't have Wi-Fi, so on a plane maybe, or in nature, sitting at a table. I'll just write and write and write. And then, okay, I might lie down somewhere and I read it and I dictate it. And as I dictate it, I can edit it and optimize it myself. That is my voice. And I know the more we do it, I urge people to just don't neglect writing like that, free flow writing. Um, some people may be familiar with the morning pages by Juliet Cameron, which is a whole sort of stream of consciousness way of starting your day, journaling, which wasn't my thing until I had an accident and I had 2 months lying on my back. But and I want to say, as a consultant, what I do, and I'll be, this is something I love doing, and it's really, really important. It informs your work. It informs the success of digital campaigns. So what I love to do is either start with a client who is a hotel that hasn't, or a travel brand that hasn't launched yet, really have that workshop where you interrogate what you want to sound like, who you are, what your brand is. That's what branding is. What you sound like, what your language is, your voice, your vocabulary. And I love doing that. Or maybe you're a brand that's been around a while and you never really did that. And you don't really know what you sound like, who you're speaking to. That is such an important part of marketing. And when people have a P&L at the start, um, of, often the branding, people they don't invest in that. I work with amazing branding agencies such as Ann Smith Design. Um, we worked on Salt in very much. They were they're incredible identity for that brand. And it's that thinking, it's that deep thinking, looking at the landscape, really creating the sort of human version of that brand before you do anything else.
Yeah,
And it's so important. And I think people skip that.
agreed. Yeah, and back into this, the AI element of that. It's like, yeah, if you don't have that, you are more likely than ever to sound like everyone else. So whatever. And then if you're trying to tell stories, if you don't know what your brand is or who you're talking to or what you're trying to say, then again, your stories aren't gonna be as good. They're just gonna be much more slapdash and not have the consistency running through them. So yeah, I agree on all those fronts. And I think on the using a pen and paper, I'm a big advocate for the whole writing is thinking kind of idea. That's, I see that a lot when I'm doing things and I'm like, I need to just sit and write things down or type things to clarify my thoughts on certain stuff. And I think if people are, the risk now is that people just kind of outsource that to a machine that's just going and finding the most common ways that everyone else thinks and sort of regurgitating that back to you. And obviously that's where creativity is kind of, the bottom is falling out of it. And on the
It's a
one hand,
race to the bottom. It's a
yeah,
race to the bottom. And it's really interesting because, exactly as you said, everyone's churning it out. So we're almost like word blind and word deaf. And also everyone's a freaking thought leader on LinkedIn. Like, enough with the thought leadership posts. People I used to go raving with in the 90s are suddenly these great thought leaders on Facebook. But I think, so just think, how can I be original? How can I really represent myself, and I'll tell you my top tip for everybody here. So I actually don't call myself a storyteller. Everyone, I don't know if you saw that Wall Street Journal article that said, I think the use of the word storyteller on LinkedIn has gone up. I don't know, there's like whatever, 500% or whatever. I don't call myself a storyteller. I am someone who seeks stories and hopefully amplifies the stories of others. And
Mm.
that's what travel brands and hotels could and should be doing.
So tell us, that's quite a nice segue into one of the questions I wanted to ask, which is around, I guess, more the like journalist side of what you do and like what makes a good story. Tell us what makes a good story. What gets you excited as a journalist when someone comes and pitches you something? What makes you pay attention? How can they get that in front of you? You know, like I say, if I can get you into journalist mode where
Yeah, yeah,
someone's listening and they're
yeah,
like, I want someone to cover my story in the press.
yeah.
Like, what tips would you give?
So I don't really know at the moment because it's a changing landscape. And actually, what made a really great, interesting story was the last thing you'd ever think of reading. However, everyone is so driven by keywords that it's become the opposite. So it's
The
challenging.
publications, do you mean?
What I mean is, if you think of how you used to consume stories in magazines or newspapers, it was happenstance. You'd start reading something. Wow, I never expected to read about that. That's so interesting. And you'll notice that the headlines in print are almost always different to the headlines now on digital,
Mm.
because digital is capturing what you are searching for, which is runs counter to what great journalism used to be, which is giving you something you didn't know you wanted to know this, right? But to quote Oscar Wilde, of course, which is the great British public has an insatiable curiosity to know that which is not worth knowing. So if we leave it to the consumer to dictate what we write about, it's all going to be the royals and right now the Beckhams. So you went back to 2020 when I was appointed the first ever sustainability editor of, I think, of any luxury travel magazine at Condé Nast Traveler. And that was very much a response to, at the time, my voice was a fresh voice around sustainability. Not everyone was talking about it. And I was coming at tourism from a very different angle. And it was actually through the pandemic where I guess because of my experience at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, seeing things from industry perspective as well as traveler perspective. And I was sharing articles such as when the pandemic hit, delay, don't cancel. And that became quite a big hashtag and campaign
Mm-hmm.
where I was urging consumers to think about the power of their prepaid trip, leaving that money in local economies. And if they demanded their deposits and their money back, that really put a lot of strain on, particularly in remote, rural, or global South communities. And so I talked about things that perhaps hadn't been talked about in the same way. And it was back then, no one was really realizing the power of travel in terms of wealth distribution. And I wrote all of the articles for Condé Nast Traveler that you might want. They're all obviously there, such as what to look for in an eco-friendly hotel, how do I really bring down my carbon emissions when I fly, and all of those things. And that's those articles exist. But in terms of searches, I am told pretty universally by most editors that consumers typically do not search so much for sustainable travel
Mm.
articles. So that's difficult. I think in terms of it's how it always has been, in terms of what to write about, it's going to be new. What's new? Really, really, brand new, exciting hotels that have beautiful images. It's really important that you can, because we have less media, people are paid, budgets are less than they were 20 years ago. So if you can present a solution to that editor's challenge, which is beautiful imagery at no cost, that's helpful. That's always going to help you. And I think firsthand experience, my lovely editor at the London Standard this week told me, she said, really substantial roundups are still working. I think that's the stuff that AI is going to be churning out now, ChatGPT. But AI can't churn out an article genuinely by an authority on boutique eco hotels such as me. Don't make me say my name in the third person. I hate that. So that's where we'll have an edge, I hope. And very first person stories. So I just wrote an article about what it's like to have an accident abroad from a practical point of view, and what it's like to experience temporary disability suddenly, and what you need to look for in a hotel, and navigating insurance and all of that. So those first person articles are really crucial. I guess I don't know how PR teams can pitch that or facilitate. The other thing is, I don't know if you saw In Travel's manifesto for freelance journalists, which they put together with Julia Spence PR, which is excellent. And it was a real benchmark that we needed in our industry, which was recognizing how hard it is to honor journalistic integrity under many of the conditions that are usually attached to press trips. So it's about, again, it's always about 360, looking at things from every angle, not just how does this suit me.
Yeah. Maybe you could give us a bit of insight into the state of journalism at the moment, because that is a big topic that, from the outside, maybe companies don't understand, and they don't know how that affects what they should be doing in terms of how they're pitching, like you say, in the situation of freelancers versus in-house teams, like how that works. Maybe let us behind the curtain a little bit on that side, Juliet, as someone who's immersed in it.
Yeah. Well, I will have to quote the name of my favorite climate podcast, Outrage and Optimism. So I'm going to have to share Outrage, and I'm going to share Optimism. Outrage is, I don't think people realize how the consequences and implications of a crisis in journalism is for all of us. And I hear so many people casually reference the mainstream media as though they're the enemy. And so people are hostile and dismissive and diminishing of journalism. Even the BBC, lots of legacy brands have made mistakes, and people, but I don't think people realize, first of all, how demoralizing it is for those of us within these ecosystems who are working hard to share the truth. That's the point of us as journalists. But also something like Sky News, which is a broadcaster, they go through a lot of checks and balances. And I think this whole climate of pointing fingers at fake news, in the UK, I will say we have some incredibly high quality, high standards of journalism. And if you look at those that are the least biased, I think it's Reuters, The Economist, Financial Times. These are very high quality journalism, public journalism, genuine journalism. I don't want to say outlets, that's a terrible word, and I think people don't realize the whole system that honors. So fact checking and how much we need that as a check, checks and balances in society. So anyway, so journalism is really hard. I don't know anyone who could honestly, not many people at all, live in a city as expensive as London and be a full-time journalist. Now, I'm someone who's always been a consultant, and I love it. But journalists who've been pure journalists are having to find other ways of earning a living as well. And I think all of us that can support that in any way we can by giving them high quality. A journalist isn't naturally always a good copywriter. They're different skills. But yesterday, I was asked to do a presentation on sustainability insights for a big digital branding agency, unpaid, to demonstrate my expertise so that they could recommend me to clients. And I'm like, well, I would hope my expertise is pretty proven. And it's really depressing that after 30 years, I'd be asked to do that. So I think all of us are complicit. We need to pay for journalism, subscribe, invest, share quality articles, give clicks to the articles, inform the algorithms, support journalists, host press trips where they can be honest and it's earned media, not be transactional, not send a laundry list of what you have to do for me if I host you in my hotel. If someone does that to me, I won't go and stay. I want 2 stories on breakfast. I've had that once. I was like, okay, I'm not coming. And if you hadn't done that, I'd probably have given you 5 stories at breakfast.
I did see something, again, this, I can't remember where I found this, but there's somewhere where it talked about you saying no to a speaking opportunity because I think
Thank
you wanted to experience more of the destination, so that it was a proper experience, so you could talk about it properly, and I guess saying no to things because from a values perspective. So I don't
Yeah,
know, maybe you could talk about that.
I
I'm
can.
interested to talk
I
about you a
can.
bit more and
Well,
qualities and things.
I'm very values driven to the point. I'm trying to sort of. It's hard sometimes. I'm going to give that. Thank you for that example. And I always wonder, did I burn a bridge there? It was an event in Athens, and I was approached, and they wanted me to fly in for 2 days, and I said, actually, if you could fly me in to Thessaloniki, where I've never been, I'd love to come down through the Zagori region. There was a whole UNESCO. It was recently sort of credited UNESCO conservation area. I'd like to be able to see that so I can justify my carbon footprint, as I call ROE, return on emissions. I'll take the bus down. All of this, this would all be on my own time and dime. And then I will arrive and do my talk. And this is what I mean about sort of this inflexibility from corporate. They just couldn't. I just had it happen now, I'm afraid to say, with Bhutan, where the organizer is, this is our system, this is our schedule, you will follow our system. And I'm like, I cannot just fly into destinations for a couple of days. It's against my religion. And I can't do it then. I said, I just can't. We have to change our way of being. And, it's not respectful. Anyway, that event I turned down, it turned out it was going to be in the airport. And my friend said, you dodged a bullet, because you would have been stood in front of an aircraft hangar. I would have been a tool for greenwashing, if I'm honest. So I'm going to assume that they're not going to hear me saying this, and I don't mean to speak negatively, but I do need people to think, like I say, look at it from every angle. Don't use me as a way for you ticking the sustainability box. That's not fair on me and my integrity.
Yeah. When we were talking about journalism, you said outrage and optimism. I think we did we did the outrage bit, didn't we?
Okay, optimism in terms of journalism. Well, something that I'm really enjoying hearing is how earned media and high quality journalism is now what informs. Let's say you put something into Google and that Gemini summary, whilst it might not credit our work, or I don't use that much of ChatGPT and those things. I'm going to give a specific example. We're both members of the Conscious Travel Foundation, and Portia, who runs Blue Apple in Colombia, in Cartagena. So I was lucky enough to be at Blue Apple in Cartagena last year, and I went to this wonderful dinner hosted by Portia and a female guest chef from Cartagena. And there were 3 long tables, and Portia explained to me that one of the tables, distinctly younger diners, they didn't know each other, but they'd all booked it because they'd found it through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT had been informed by traditional press articles. So Portia has a PR company, Abel and Graham, and so they are, in the old-fashioned way, getting journalists to cover in print and online media, and those articles were informing ChatGPT, and that's what got those people there. So that's what I'm saying is it's a different route to the consumer via maybe ChatGPT, but it's still earned press and traditional media that's informing it.
Yeah, indeed. I think there is well, certainly at the moment, and I expect it will continue, because I think it all comes back to the trust point that you've highlighted a couple of times, of where people will only trust these tools as far and as long as they provide good, useful information. So they need to go somewhere that is giving them good, useful information, rather than random comments or SEO written things that just don't have factual information. So I think the key of finding that balance between doing good PR for your company, getting coverage in good publications, but also it's kind of the mix of bigger, better known publications, or at least this is the case at the moment, and smaller niche specialist publications about particular topics. So if you're talking about wellness or sustainability or things like that, then certainly it's not just about Condé Nast necessarily, or Forbes or the BBC. It's like, what are the smaller sustainability specific publications out there that if you can get featured in them, then like you say, Gemini and ChatGPT and so on will kind of go and source that information, as well as looking at review sites and looking at the sites of the people themselves to kind of make sure that all those signals line up. So, yeah, I agree. I think people more and more,
Yeah.
as they understand that landscape better, will value the elements that are playing into it and not know that it's not just one direct line and connection. It's kind of, hey, we've got to do this, this, and this kind of en route to that outcome if we want to see success on that platform.
And just control your own narrative and just, work with great high quality journalists, integrity, let them, obviously they write what they write. But then there are also opportunities with so many great freelance travel writers out there. Maybe get them to invite them to write guest blog posts, pay them properly, support high quality journalists and journalism. That would be my big, message to everyone as well.
Yeah, fab. That's good. That sounds optimistic. I think we tick that box. Tell me, I was leaning into like your qualities there, and I'm interested to explore that a little bit further, kind of on a personal level. Like, what sort of things do you think have led to your success and where you've got to, Juliet? Is there anything that kind of stands out? I mean, you've used a phrase out there that it's saying I'm an agitator. Like,
Thank you.
tell me a bit
Yeah.
about that maybe, and anything else that you think has helped you get to where you are.
Yes, thank you. I added that. Actually, I'm going to give you me as ever radical honesty. I'll tell you why I put that in my bio. There's a real culture of cut and paste these days and fake it till you make it. And I noticed, and I really urge people, younger generations coming in, they they don't have the same sort of, they haven't gone through the same process of respecting IP and all of those things. So they're I sometimes see, you know, um, more junior people, shall we say, have copied my bio on their Instagram and things like that. So I like to, I always see it as, all of these challenges, they're our teacher and they push you to do better and get ahead of it. So I like to throw in extra words that other people haven't used. Agitator is definitely one of them. And I like to sort of, not just editor, writer, what differentiates me. So I'd say over the years, what distinguishes me? Well, I don't ever I don't cut and paste with my work in any way. I don't follow what other people are doing. When we created Mr. and Mrs. Smith, no other hotel guides had done best table in the restaurant, favorite room as such. They, of course, they could say the top room, the category, but we specifically meant this sort of one that was maybe a bit quirky or romantic, and that became industry standard. I know that people will think that's just the norm, but it really wasn't then. uh, Style and setting, the way we created the style of the hotel and the setting, and the idea was that if you put those two together, it summed it up in a sort of poetic, lyrical way. So I've always been someone who loves to come up with fresh ideas, and I've since I did my webinar on solutions-led storytelling, I've heard other journalists use that, and I'm happy for that to be emulated. I think I take risks, I speak up, and that doesn't always do me. I hope it speaks to integrity and honesty, which we're fast losing. Um, I think I've always been a disruptor. I've probably been a bit, when it comes to sustainability, a bit harsh for some people sometimes, speaking the truth. It's uncomfortable. But history will remember those who speak up better typically. So, over the years, it's learning to say it in a way, it's about energy, that doesn't make people contract, it makes them expand. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to stand in front of an audience of hoteliers, which I often do at conferences, and say, those big chain hotels where there's terrible economic leakage, they are not as good as the small hotels where the owner really is an invested custodian of that community and its natural landscape. That's uncomfortable, and a lot of people don't necessarily like me for it, but I would hope it speaks to my integrity. And I don't know, it's hard to say. And in terms of success, I'm not as successful as I could have been a lot of the time. I turned down £1,000 an hour consultancy to Saudi quite a few years ago, and do I regret it? Hell yes. you know Now everyone's nose is in that trough. And I have a lot of that was me being prejudiced actually as well for all the reasons, a journalist doesn't necessarily want to support a regime that's just chopped up one of its fellow journalists in an embassy. My dad was an ambassador, so particularly uncomfortable and unpalatable.
Mm.
And we have to be principled. But I also do try and think, I've done my homework and my history of that part of the world. I'm trying to understand. We can't just say the Middle East, that's just saying Europe, obviously understanding the nuances, respecting its investment in innovation, trying to look for the positives and trying not to be prejudiced and checking my own prejudices. So, but I think what I do is I do tend to introduce new topics. So last year I very much, I hope, amplified the importance of acknowledging the movement of people in terms of displaced people. And I worked with the asylum speakers. And I'm really proud now that, asylum speakers gave a keynote at the trade show Pure in Marrakesh, and now a part of the Conscious Travel Foundation. And so I'm always trying to advance conversation in areas perhaps that we haven't typically spoken loudly enough about. And I'm not shy. I remember when Black Lives Matter happened in 2020, and I immediately, conscious of, the definition of privilege is thinking something doesn't matter just because we haven't personally experienced it. And I remember immediately wanting to do an article where I interviewed people who could speak to racism firsthand and acknowledge that through travel. I've never been shy about that, but doing it in a sensitive way. And of course, it's not us imposing our narrative or voice, but having people from the communities that we're talking about all the time. I just encourage people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ireland, when I spent time there, one of my best trips last year, I went to Native in West Cork. I urge everyone to spend time there with Dee Dee and Simon. And Skibbereen. So I referenced Skibbereen, which has an actual museum around the famine that affected them. And of course, UK historians may refer to that as the Great Hunger. Irish historians will refer to it as state-sanctioned starvation. And it's these subtlety, well, it's not subtle to them, but these distinct nuances that we have to navigate in a much more sensitive way. I remember a hotel designer once saying to me, he was working on a wonderful hotel in Antigua, which was like, reference the golden age of Antigua. And I just said, the golden age for whom? And he went, oh, So I think it's important we just look at everything from every angle and ensure the optics, if we're talking about a particular marginalized community, or make sure that you have them inputting on what you're saying.
Yeah. It is a interesting and difficult sort of place and decision as to where the line is between not becoming involved in something which maybe doesn't align with your values, but where doing that might enable a positive outcome. I'm going back to the Saudi example that you had there of like, oh yeah, there's lots of things that you at a kind of personal level, one at a personal level might not might disagree with, might not agree with, but is shining a light on it and talking about it and giving some input, the lever that starts moving things in the right direction. How do you, because I think there's maybe a bit of a alignment with travel and sustainability here as well, where you could talk about, hey, you talked about the return on emissions thing earlier, and that idea of, oh yeah, we should travel, we should come in it with we think this is a good thing for the world, but at the same time, if you're flying around everywhere, that's maybe in contrast to that. So I don't know, how do you think about that, Juliet? Any guides on that for how people could think about it?
Yeah, and I think we always have to check our own judgment on things. I think there can be a lot of judgment in the sustainability space, and sustainability isn't binary. Juliet, you flying, you are bad, you can't really care about climate. Well, if I'm going to stand in front of an audience of 800 decision makers and influence their decisions moving forward, it's going to be net positive, my carbon footprint trade-off. But I would just say with everything, going back to the Saudi, that was me being principled. When I say the £1,000 an hour, I mean they offered me £8,000 for an hour conversation. I should say they weren't offering me a job that paid me £1,000 an hour. I'd be talking to you from Riyadh right now. um, I think it's approaching everything from a place of curiosity, and I'm going to share something that was deeply my most uncomfortable moments myself have been my greatest moments of reflection. I've had a couple, and one of them I was on a stage. I was being interviewed in front of an audience of American travel agents, and the person interviewing me, the guy, um, he didn't ask any of the questions that we'd gone through on the Zoom. He suddenly threw me all these curveball questions. He was clearly a climate change denier. I could not believe it. It's the most destabilized I've ever felt, the most disrespected I've ever felt. But I took a moment and I thought, I've got how I don't want to bring anger energy to this room. I just stopped him and went, wow, I'm really surprised you're speaking to me like that. Um, and I was pretty bold, and I said, I'm going to say, I'm going to say, here we are, and we're in a ballroom at the Dorchester, Park Lane, and we're both white people. And I'm going to say I'm really uncomfortable with that because you're diminishing us caring about climate ultimately is racist. And there was a whole gasp in the room. I thought, oh no, I'm going to be cancelled for busting out the R word in this situation. And I said, because most people who are on the receiving end of the fallout of the climate emergency are distinctly, of the 8 billion people in the world, distinctly people of color. So that is systemic racism. And most people, this was a couple of years ago, all of this to say, I came off that stage, apart from using the worst word I knew, not realizing my mic was still on to describe him, was that I thought, how can I give more voice to people who are not heard as much? And so actually that started my journey to work with asylum speakers. So what I'm saying is taking those risks, those uncomfortable moments can lead to our most important conversations. And when I work with, I love Jazz so much. She's like my life coach in lots of ways. And I said to her, I was at a hotel recently where genuinely older white guy from up north, just saying, no, he was from Yorkshire actually, Tom. And he said to me, if I could press a button and all those small boats in the channel would drown, I would. He said that to me, right? Now, in that moment, I'm very much there as an ambassador for the hotel I was representing. Very uncomfortable moment. What do I do? I mean, I walked away and I cried. But my friend Jazz said, always come from a place of curiosity. And I practice it in a mirror, my hand on the mirror, if that happens again, and it has since, where I don't tense up or get angry because they don't hear you then, is I looked at him and went, in future, if that happened again, with him, I'd go, why would you say that? And, it's leaning into conversations with the spirit with curiosity. And that is what I'm saying. Imagine a world where we didn't talk less about politics and religion. Imagine a world where we all respectfully, from a place of curiosity, leaned into more conversations about it. And I really feel that a lot of the problems we see in this world, xenophobia, all of this, people wouldn't be like that if they had friends who were from the nations and communities that they were speaking about.
Yeah.
And people, my dear friend Giel in Sudan, I was with some people from the Isle of Wight the other day, and they said, oh, all of these refugee hotels. I went shocked, visibly. So I tried it out. I said, oh, why would you say that? I said, you know my friend Giel? Oh, not like Giel. And I said, no, they are. They're exactly like Giel. It's just that you know Giel, so he's humanized to you. So I think constantly, and this is the beauty of travel, is we are literally moving people. That's what we do as an industry, from one place to another and get them to. So the more we can get people at eye level, exchanging ideas and thoughts with people who might have different thoughts to theirs. And I don't know how we facilitate that. There's different ways of doing that. But the more we get people to be human with each other, and I'm sure that brings it full circle with our stories. I asked my lovely guy in the restaurant at breakfast at the Dat Island Cowie. I said to my friend, I'm going to ask him, what does he care about more than anything? She went, oh no, he'll be really uncomfortable. Yeah, so they're quite a conservative society, Malaysia, or respectful, reserved. And I said to him, um, "Tell me, I didn't know his name. Sorry, I don't know his name, but I see him every morning." And I said, "Can I ask you a question, a bit personal? What do you care about more than anything in the world?" And he said to me straight away, without a beat, "My mum." You know, making sure my mum's okay and she's healthy and she's happy. And we ended up having this really rich conversation, which was incredibly touching. And I just encourage people to do that more.
Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. Something else that you've said, I'm sticking with the equalities thread here, Juliet. Something else, I can't, again, I'm not sure if I saw this quoted somewhere. It was in a conversation together where you said adversity breeds grit. So tell us about grit and adversity and how that's helped you along the way.
Thank you. Now, it's very important, going back to my comment about citation and crediting, just by crediting someone else's wisdom doesn't take away from our own credibility. That is my mentor, Zita Cobb, founder and innkeeper behind Fogo Island Inn in Canada. That's my favorite ever interview I've done for the London Standard. If you put Zita Cobb, the Standard, in there, and that is the pull quote. And Zita's story of actually starts from when she was born, six of seven children, the only girl in a home with no running water, no electricity, in Newfoundland in Canada on Fogo Island. And when she was 5 years old, they discovered that she had TB, and she was taken to the mainland, put in a sanatorium, which had razor wire around it. She was there for a year. She devoured every book she could find. She'd sneak up to the adult floor to read all their books when she'd done with all the children's books. And she is the living, walking, breathing, game-changing, visionary example of adversity breeds grit. And I don't think there's enough adversity for travelers today. That's when the magic happens, for our children, for the next generation. And I think those moments of discomfort, going back to that, allowing those, that's where we develop resilience, of course, but also wisdom.
Yes. I now bringing 3 children up, I'm always trying to throw them into some adversity along the way, make things a little bit more difficult for them, because I think it is it is very important. And I think travel is an excellent mechanism for doing that and putting people in uncomfortable places where they can learn a lot in a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, we think people need to be wrapped in cotton wool. That's the challenge with luxury travel in particular. But actually, that's why I always, I love the tours that G Adventures, Intrepid, not in the guidebooks, do, where they really connect you with locals. It's not adversity, because ultimately they're a travel operator. People pay to be comfortable on holiday, but they take them out of their comfort zones. Let's put it that way, and they experience local, transport and just regular day-to-day life for local people, rather than being in this sanitized bubble of luxury in a different geography, and yet not experiencing really what life there is like.
Yeah. And there's a difference between travel and holidays as well, isn't there? So, I think I look for it when people are applying for jobs here, for example. It's like if they've traveled a bit and it looks like they've been out on their own, going places and working things out. I've spoken to a few people this week who have been female solo travelers, and immediately they go up in my estimations, because I think the likelihood that they are curious, have a worldview, have, a bit more context to what difficult things are out there, then I think they're better prepared for, the working world in that context, but the world in general. So, I think as an industry, we have a tool here, the thing that and I guess this is tying back to that thing of the battle of flying and, potential climate affecting things, and where the balance is between the negatives that come from that and the positives that come from connecting people, seeing other people in different places and understanding the world better. There's kind of an argument there for both ways, isn't there? And like where the sort of happy medium point is to do those things. Time has flown by. It always does in these conversations, and we've covered a lot. Something I always ask to people is what they would recommend to someone new starting in the industry. So I guess if someone's thinking about starting a a hotel or a tour operator or a DMC or something like that, what would you recommend to them, Juliet, when they're starting? Is there something specific you would say? You could, again, obviously you
Yeah.
can bring sustainability into this if you wish. It can be more broad. Yeah, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of anyone who's working, I mean, it's pretty universal. I'd say decide what your niche is. And I always say, think about your ikigai. Of course, the Japanese philosophy or reason for being. And your ikigai, if you picture those four circles in the Venn diagram, it's what you love doing, what you're good at, what you can be paid for. But the all important one is what the world needs. And does the world need more words? Probably not. About travel? Probably not. Does it need more educated, helpful, knowledgeable words that steer people to businesses that are doing good? Absolutely. So just work out what your niche is. Is it what the world needs? And get yourself a great mentor. I wish I'd done that earlier in my career. I was surrounded by too many ravers. I mean, they were great mentors in terms of fun. But I'm very lucky to know Zita Cobb. There's also Victoria Fuller. If people know Victoria, she's behind the Global Retreat Company. She did PR for Four Seasons for 25 years. So these are women for me who I've learned so much around integrity, and and have incredible values, purpose-driven people.
Agreed. I think putting mission behind everything and knowing why you're doing something is will always help you build something useful that relates to something that you want to do and how you want to do it. That's a bit more long lasting and impactful. What about let's look to the future a little bit. How do you want to evolve, Juliet? What you're doing? Are you happy and comfortable with what you're doing at the moment and just do more of it? Are there areas that you want to evolve into?
Thanks for asking me what I want to do. I absolutely entered this year with a determination just to give my energy to people and properties and businesses that are what the world needs. And absolutely, and I've for the first time, because I mentioned to you, I had surgery and I had time out for the first time in 30 years. I've never taken time out to really reflect, and it was to be much more discerning about what I work on. And it can be tempting to take lots of small jobs to stay busy, but really just keeping my eye on the horizon and wanting to work with quality businesses that I believe in. And that means saying no. It really does. And just maintaining integrity. I think what the world needs is integrity.
What about the future of travel? How do you see that? Have you got any thoughts on how you see travel and I guess the industry evolving over the next 5 years,
Yeah.
if we were going to put that some time frame on it?
Yeah. Well, something that I'm doing a lot more of, which I really love, is lecturing. So I work with the Bull Inn in Totnes, Devon, on their regenerative hospitality course, and I also contribute the University of Surrey. And so I think now that these regenerative hospitality models and learnings are entering the educational mainstream, I hope we're going to have more businesses developing, also the Shorefast Institute in Canada, where they understand the importance of leaving more money in local communities, not just because it's nice, not just because it honors place, but because that wealth distribution and it's a universal issue around the world that people are leaving remote rural areas and moving to cities to get jobs and going to work for these big companies. But we need to be funneling this money into all of these rural communities. So I hope there'll be more tourism businesses that understand the importance of that culturally, and also, in terms of society, in terms of honestly, it's everywhere. We need to leave more money in local economies through tourism. Uh, if I give you one example, let's look at Kenya and let's look at the Masai Mara, for example. And you've got all these pastoralists who are the custodians and the people who look after that land and the biodiversity and protect it. Now, if they don't have any revenue through tourism, let's say, they have to go and find jobs. I understand lots of people go to Dubai, and that breaks up whole families, whole villages, whole communities. You lose so much. And yeah, I think that people educating themselves on the importance of regenerative economics in rural areas is I hope where the future of
Am-
tourism should be.
Amen to that. And it,
Oh
and
yes,
it,
of course, Tom. Of course, you know that better than anyone. That's what you support through your business.
we do. I think. Well, listen, you've mentioned people like the Conscious Travel Foundation, and I have met lots of amazing people who are doing fabulous things through that. I've spoken to some of them on this podcast. Zakia from Invisible Cities, when we're talking about curiosity, and they support people suffering from homelessness and turning them into tour guides and doing amazing things that, I know there's other organisations like Unseen Tours and places like that do great things on that front. So yeah, you've highlighted lots of fabulous places and examples that hopefully people will look up afterwards, and we'll link to them in the show notes so that they can see those and be inspired by those even further. Because I think when you see it in action, you start to be able, or at least this is how it works for me, I'm better able to visualize and get ideas for how that might work for me, and start to do that as well.
Can I give you one little tiny language tweak? Give you an example of how much I look at language and think about it, and how.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't mean to seem like I'm correcting you. It's just a moment of reflection. So you just said people who are suffering homelessness, right? So first of all, that's a big tick because you put them as people first, not identifiable by their homeless people. But you said suffered, so that would be a little. Ooh. When I use language, and this is just an idea for everyone, to really give dignity to everyone at all times, we might say people who are, well, Americans being very politically correct might say unhoused, or they might say displaced, but people who have experienced homelessness. Because any of us can make a few decisions in our life that go wrong, and we can end up in that way. And we don't want to represent our fellow humans as victims. It's just for me, it's about language, always making sure we're really respectful of each other. And really, I got someone message me the other day when I referred to people who are disabled and correcting me, and I should have, and she did it in a really sort of patronizing way. And I said, I really welcome conversation, but we should also not be patronizing. So it's always a conversation, sharing it, not saying you're wrong, I'm right, but just, oh, have you considered?
Hey,
so there we are.
I'm always up for being educated and getting better, and hopefully that helps other people who are listening as well. Again, when I spoke to Zakia, she did a fabulous job of shining a light on what is going on in that area, and it was it opened my eyes to so many things, as lots of these conversations have, like you say, when you're talking about a wrong decision here or there and having pretty significant consequences. We're all people at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'll just say it again. Privilege is thinking something doesn't matter just because you've never experienced it.
Juliette, it's been absolutely lovely to chat with you. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or discuss before I let you go?
I'll just say thank you, and to keep sharing your stories that inspire impact. Always share them with me on Instagram. Follow me. I'd love it if people follow me on Instagram. My name, Juliet Kinsman. So yeah, and let's keep sharing those stories.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Well, listen, we'll link to your profiles, all the things that you've mentioned through the episode, Juliette, so that people can find you. If you're listening, look up Boutico. If you're thinking about storytelling, follow Juliette and get some ideas and inspiration from the various things that she does and works on. Think about your ikigai, be curious, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Juliette.
Thanks, Tom.
And there we have it. Big thanks to Juliette for joining us for the podcast. I've wanted to record a conversation with her for a long time now, so it was great to finally make that happen. I took loads of notes. I hope you did too, and came away with lots of inspiration from what she shared there. If you want to access the resources and other information from that episode, go to north9.agency/podcast, and you'll find that and all the other episodes we've recorded there too. And if you're a business in travel or hospitality looking for marketing support, then drop us a line, go to north9.agency, and we'd love to find out more about you and see if we can help. You can also read more about our 100% initiative on the website, where we share the story behind how we give all the profit we make from our work with clients to educational charities and try to have a positive impact on the world with what we do. There's more great episodes coming in season 3, loads of great guests, so stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, follow us on whatever platform makes most sense for you, and in the meantime, stay safe, keep exploring, and happy travels.